comes in, we can probably bring him in quickly.
Okay.
And now we go on live. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, we have people starting to come in. We'll give them a minute to join us. Hi, everyone who's coming in. Welcome and thank you for joining us this evening. As we wait for the others to come in, please feel free to drop your names and the city or country you belong to in your chat box option at the bottom of the screen. You'll see a chat box at the bottom of your screen. Please drop in your name and the city or country you belong to so we can say hi. Okay. Okay, we have India, we have Bangladesh so far. And Mauritius, Muscat, UAE. Oh, and it's going so fast. All right. Great. I'm so happy to see all of you here. Thank you so much for joining us. We will just begin in a couple of minutes while and we have Tanzania, while all of you say hi to us. Okay, we have Kenya as well. All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us, everyone who has joined us on Zoom and on YouTube. Thank you for taking the time this evening, and we're sure we have a wonderful learning session planned for you, and we hope you take back a lot from this, from all the esteemed panelists that we have with us. And we'll just wait for another 30 odd seconds. Welcome to everyone who's on our chat as well. Thank you. Okay, while another couple of people are joining in, I have a couple of basic instructions for all of you here. You have a Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. Please use that for asking questions to our panelists. You can type out the questions in the Q&A boxes, and at the end of the session is when we will be asking our panelists those questions. Don't use the chat for asking your questions, because we might miss them in the entire flow, but please use the Q&A box. Okay, I think we have a nice number come in. So welcome everyone. Good evening once again on this session, which is presented by Harvard MUN Dubai in association with Ivy Central. I am Prakriti from Worldview Education. For the last 10 years, Worldview has been working towards curating powerful and insightful learning experiences across the globe for you, Generation Z. The Harvard Model United Nations, or HMUN, is an initiative of the Harvard University's International Relations Council. This conference series is 67 years old and engages over 6,000 students every year across its 3 conferences in the United States, China, and in India. This June, Worldview Education and Harvard University's IRC were scheduled to host the first edition of HMUN in Dubai. However, due to the unfortunate global pandemic, we weren't able to host the conference as planned. But we decided that a global lockdown shouldn't stop you, the Generation Z, from having a platform to debate and discuss the pressing problems of the world. And today, the need to be a global citizen is being challenged more than ever before. So, Harvard IRC and Worldview Education are proud to present a special online edition of HMUN Dubai from the 11th to 15th of June 2020. We hope this conference provides you a platform to continue to discuss and debate the many challenges the world faces today. As a run-up to the conference, we thought it would be a great idea for some of the questions that you might have about your academic future to be answered, especially in these uncertain times. And who better to answer those questions than the people who have over 25 years of experience in that very space. We are pleased to announce HMAN Dubai's association with Ivy Central this year, an organization that specializes in placing students in top universities in the United States, the UK, and Canada. Today, we are happy to have with us from Ivy Central, Claudia Salinas, a lead counselor who has worked at a wide range of universities and colleges, ranging from the Ivy Leagues to the small liberal arts. Claudia has developed a specialized set of expertise for helping students better understand the numerous college and university options that are out there. We also have Martin Fleet, who has 30 years of experience in educational and career counseling. As one of the 4 lead counselors at Ivy Central, Martin also helps students prepare for college admission interviews and find summer school opportunities uniquely suited to their interests and goals. Claudia and Martin have very kindly agreed to moderate the session for us today. Joining us on the panel discussion, we are very pleased to have with us 3 illustrious admissions representatives from eminent colleges from across the world. Each of their profiles and introductions are enviable, and I might not be able to do justice to their accomplishments through my introduction, but here goes. Our third panelist is running slightly late and might be delayed, but we have with us right now Adrian Amador Odi, Dean of Admissions, Trinity College, a national leader in the admissions field, having served in admissions positions also at Berry College, the University of Rochester, and Kenyon College. Widely regarded as an ethical leader with a deep passion for all aspects of this work, Adrian has built strong relationships with school counselors all over the country. Ishtiar Chaudhry, Associate Director of International Admissions, University of Rochester. He has been at Rochester since 2013, and his admissions work has been primarily focused on regions across Asia, with additional expertise in Middle East and Europe, a lot of the regions that you all belong to. Thank you, panelists, for joining us for this session from your various time zones and taking the time to address these students. With that list of highly experienced panelists, I hand over the Zoom stage to Claudia and Martin to take forward this discussion. And I hope you all enjoy and learn through the session. I will connect back with you at the end. A gentle reminder to put in all your questions on the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Oh, we have Aaron who's joined in as well. Sorry. Hi, Aaron. I was on another screen, so I didn't see you. We have Aaron Brown, Associate Director of Application Review, University of California, San Diego. Aaron has nearly 13 years of experience in the admissions profession. In his current role, he is responsible for managing the application evaluation process for over 120,000 first-year and transfer applications that UC San Diego receives annually. So welcome, and thank you again, all of you, for joining us. Over to Claudia and Martin. Take it from here.
Okay, Prakriti, thank you for the introduction. And on behalf of Ivy Central, a very warm welcome to you all. It's lovely to have you joining us, and I hope you're going to find this a useful and informative session. The impact that pandemic is having, brings about concerns on an unprecedented scale. Now, I'm sure you've all lived through crises before, so you know that things will improve, but when and how it's going to impact on your future and your plans for college. These are the questions that we're hopefully going to address in this session with the help of our expert panel, who we've just been introduced to. But before we do that, I just wanted to take a minute or so to recognize that in a time of uncertainty, what our brains really crave is certainty. And the danger is that this lack of certainty can lead to panic and confusion, which in turn increases concern rather than ease them. Therefore, it's necessary that we don't let our brain go on into overdrive and panic, but rather try to break down our concerns and seek to assess what we can influence and control. To help you understand what I mean by this, I want to introduce you to a concept called circles of control and influence. Now, this is a concept that can be used in all number of different scenarios. But in this version, which was prepared by our colleagues Mindy Rose and Mark Moody, they've taken that and applied it to the process of college planning. So I'm just going to very quickly share my screen with you so that you can, so I can show you what it is I'm trying to talk about. Okay. I seem to be having some problems. Okay, the technology is letting me down at the last moment. But what I wanted to outline to you was that you can think about there are things that we can have control over. And in terms of college applications, that's things like the effort that you put into extracurricular work. It's things like your behavior. It's things like how you communicate. Then there are things that you don't have direct control over, but that you can influence. So that be including things like your academic record. It would include things like recommendations from school. And then on that outer circle, there are the things that you don't have any control over. You don't have control over the strength of other people applying to colleges. You don't have control over how colleges are going to actually assess your application. So in these circumstances, let's say, it's really important that you try not to get, or try not to let the things that you don't have control over cause you to panic and worry unnecessarily, but you look to concentrate on the things that you can control. So with that, what I want to do now is just to move on, and you've already been introduced to the panel, so we'll move straight on to just raising some of the questions that we have been getting recently from the people that we work with, and we'll explore those a little bit together. So to kick off this discussion, one of the big topics that's being discussed by students is the move to test optional, or a test optional policy by colleges. So I understand University of Rochester introduced a test optional policy last year. So I thought, could you perhaps tell us a little bit about what test optional means and how you consider applications from students who don't submit a standardized test?
Sure, happy to talk about that. Test optional, I think you'll see a lot of schools going test optional, either permanently, right, or even temporarily for the next year for our applicants. So it's important to understand, first of all, that test optional doesn't mean you can't send your tests, right? So I think that the quandary that students face is deciding, well, do I send my scores? Do I not send my scores? You know, how is my application going to be advantaged or disadvantaged if I make one choice over the other? And part of that is breaking away from a picture many students and families might have that we're looking at your application and assigning points, right, in a certain way to your essay and your scores and your recommendations. We're not giving you an 80% for your SAT scores and then a 50% on your academics, and then adding that up to get a quantitative evaluation. The vast majority of holistic admissions processes in the US are, looking at that as a whole, right? And so we're coupling things like your test scores, your academics, the rigor of the classes that you've taken, the grades that you've actually gotten in those classes, to then come up with an overall picture of your potential for academic success at our institutions. So when you decide not to submit your test scores, all that's really happening is that we're placing more emphasis on everything else, right? And because that's what we have to go off of and form a basis of understanding for your academics. And the guidelines I generally advise students is that a lot of students are still going to take the SAT or still going to take the ACT. And think about that institution's middle 50%, right? We publicize that information at places that still accept test scores, and you can see the enrolling students, what kind of scores are they getting? What do we consider competitive? And if your scores are sort of in that middle 50% range, you're pretty much on par with the typical applicant that's getting admitted and enrolling at that school, right? Obviously, if it's higher, the scores will still help your application. So the flip side of it is that there are people reading your applications, right? And if you put a test score in front of our faces, as much as we might try to forget about a lower test score, right? Many offices, I think this is the reality, you can't unsee a test score. And so if you decide to send a really low test score of your application, but you're still choosing to go test optional, you're not doing yourself any favors, right? We have safety checks and balances to try and eliminate that possibility if you try to go test optional and accidentally send scores, but I can't tell you what to do one way or the other, right? But I can give you that information to help guide your decision. Look at those middle 50%, right? And see where you land. But when you don't send them, again, I'm going to place more emphasis on that rigor. I'm going to place more emphasis on the grades that you may have gotten academically, rather than spreading that out across more materials that you send when you add test scores.
Okay, thank you. So just to be clear, it's not a question of test blind. It's a question of looking at the other information that an applicant sends in and making a decision on the basis of that.
That's right.
Anyone else have any other perception or views around this they might want to contribute? No? So one of the things which is really sort of, there's been generated a certain amount of speculation as to, is this the beginning of the end for SAT and ACT? I can see you smiling at that. So what's your view?
So we've been test optional at Trinity for the last 5 years and have seen greater and greater percentages of our students not submitting test scores at all. So when we started 5 years ago, only about 15% of students chose not to submit test scores as part of their applications. And now we have over 2/3 of our applicants and similarly 2/3 of our admits who did not submit any kind of test score. And I think as more and more colleges learn about what tests do and what they don't do and what they measure and can predict and how helpful they are, I think we'll see maybe a continued de-emphasis on standardized testing. It's so ingrained in our processes though, and in the experiences that students are having. And so I think sometimes when we talk about test optional, students who are really good at tests and score really high think that somehow we don't value that experience anymore. And we absolutely do. Just like Isthir was saying, we can't unsee a low test score. We also can't unsee a high test score and are, humans who are positively influenced by that score, because we've all been working in admissions for quite some time and likely started when tests played a greater role. So what we're trying to do as college admissions officers is figure out how to give students the best possible chance of receiving a yes. So I can't say for sure that the test will go away, because for some students that really helps us say yes to them. And for others, we'll try to find ways to say yes in different ways.
Okay, thank you. So over the last couple of months or so, we've seen lots of ACTs, SAT tests cancelled, postponed. We've also seen the abandoning of a lot of the end of year tests for IBs and IGCSEs and various other qualifications that students are working towards. So how are your colleges going to be reviewing the applications that you receive, particularly in the next few months with those that are applying in the fall? What's your views on that? If I can ask you, Aaron, what your thought, what are you doing at San Diego?
So the UCs have obviously made the decision to be test optional this year, and that's something that is new for us, and so something that we are all working very hard on right now to try and understand what the implications are of that in our review process, and kind of how long that process might last. I think once you go test optional for whichever reason, likely you don't go back. And so we're thinking about kind of what are the downstream implications of that in our review process. And being a public system, clearly there's a different use of the test in all kinds of facets of our process. And even if students can graduate from universities and meeting requirements. And so we need to think more broadly about the test. But that's something that we're having discussions on now is, kind of what do we do in exactly the situations that my panelists and colleagues have already mentioned, with a student who does and doesn't submit exams. And then broadly with other cancellations, we will be flexible. And I think that's generally the takeaway that I want students to have after this discussion this morning, is that we're all in this unprecedented situation together. And we will be making decisions that ultimately I think are done with the perspective of helping students and helping them navigate this time and this process, and not allowing what has gone on to impact their ability to matriculate at our colleges and universities. And so if that means that, we're going to look at the IB certificates that are still going to be, given based on internal assessments and all of that, we will still consider those to be valid in the same way the external assessments, and same thing with GCSEs, IGCSEs, etc. There are replacements for many of these exams, and they're still receiving some type of assessment. And so using that in lieu of the traditional exam, I think, is where we'll likely be heading.
Thank you. Claudia, do you have any view on this?
So I think that I think Aaron is spot on with saying that most colleges and universities are going to be practicing some level of flexibility. I think that this is why when we're starting to look at other critical factors of your application, we're really starting to look at other variables with a little bit more weight. And so that 4-year transcript, that 4 years worth of work that you've completed in high school, will continue to be a part of the conversation. And so we will want to make sure that you're still putting your best foot forward with your application, and that you're really able to address some of the other aspects of your application. So we still will look at your activities, and we're still going to look at what have you done in terms of organizations and service. And so most of the schools, many schools that are more openly available to international students, practice holistic review. And so we've always taken into consideration many variables. And so that's something that we want to continue to emphasize, is that those testing pieces are only one element out of many that are taken into consideration. And so these other pieces will continue to play a role.
If there can be seen to be an upside at all to the whole COVID-19 situation, I guess it is that everybody that's going to be putting in applications in the next few months is actually going to be in a very similar position, aren't they? So it's not a question of anyone being disadvantaged because they've not been able to do final exams, because everyone's pretty much in the same boat. Okay. Moving on to the next one, and the sort of moving into the thorny subject of finance, because Adrienne, I'm going to aim this one to you first of all. Financial planning should be an important part of the preparation for college, and it's certainly something that we have lots of conversations with the families that we work with to help them understand about the different financial aid that's available. How do you see COVID having an impact on the opportunities for financial aid and scholarship, particularly for international students?
That's a great question. And I'm so glad that your families are thinking about financial planning for college. I see some folks of different ages on the chat right now. And so even for some of the younger students, I think beginning that financial planning piece early, particularly in light of the global economic experience we're having in addition to the health experience we're having right now, is really important. For us, certainly there's a financial impact to the institution, but we also know that there's a significant financial impact to our current student families and prospective student families. And we're in the fortunate position to have been able to raise an incredible amount of funding to increase financial aid for current students. And we are, maybe for the first time in quite some time, very unlikely to increase our tuition and costs for next year, knowing that families are being hit just like we are. So we are making every effort to figure out ways to provide pathways to college for students and families at a number of different financial backgrounds. So I see for us, we are likely to increase our scholarships and to increase our financial aid because we want students on our campus and as a part of our communities. So we're going to try to figure out ways, just as Erin was saying, in terms of being flexible in our admissions requirements. I think we will continue to be flexible in the financial aid and scholarship process as well, because we want you in college.
I can see Ishii nodding his head, so you obviously agree with that.
Yeah, and Rochester, the conversations move a little bit slower, than many places, but we still want students to be on campus. And for international students, financial planning and applying for aid is a whole different ballgame, right? Because it's simply more competitive. And the people who are going to be impacted most are those who need partial funding to attend their US institution. And those are the biggest most challenging conversations we have, especially in the spring, because students who need a full ride, I don't think you can get any more competitive for you to be applying to US institutions, right? You need to be top of the line. You need to be engaging with your colleges. Students who are fortunate enough to not worry about financial aid also have, that easy end of the process. But I think you need to be thoughtful about being very upfront and honest about both the financial picture you're presenting in your CSS profile. There shouldn't be much leeway to adjust, the picture that you present, but understanding that institutions are calculating based on numbers, right, that are providing the CSS profile, not how much we like you or not when we determine that financial aid package. And we're also not really able to say, well, you want this much, so we'll just give you this much, right? If that's really more than we can provide you based on the amount that we calculate that you can afford, you should understand that as you apply to colleges, that expectation isn't necessarily going to be met if your want is really higher than your demonstrated need. So that'll probably become, I've just talked to counselors around the world, and that's more and more of a conversation we have as there are more mid-range needs students who need a piece of funding, but not necessarily the whole thing.
So that sounds as if it could be a positive conversation to have. Okay, let's move away a little bit, because students have applied. We've got students that have applied for college and been accepted, have been looking forward to making a start in the autumn. We're hearing it could be a very, very different experience to what would normally confront new students. So could I ask the three of you really just say a little bit about how your colleges are making arrangements for the teaching of new students this fall? So can we start with you, Aaron?
So we haven't made a formal determination yet on whether the fall quarter, since you see that many of us are on quarters, will be remote, will be in person, or will be some hybrid. And so I think that for what I'm hearing from the senior leadership on our campus is it will likely be some sort of hybrid where there will be some sort of online courses and some sort of in-person courses, and that students who, I think the first thing is that for many of our international students, we understand that getting visas in time may be a challenge, given just the appointments for interviews to sit down with a consular official. So we've given all international students this fall the ability to complete their first quarter in a remote setting, and then joining us in January, should they wish, and should that be a requirement, even if the rest of the campus has gone in person, just because they can't get here. Our chancellor actually introduced a fairly comprehensive plan last week called Return to Learn, focusing on kind of the steps that they will take to ensure the safety of our campus community, and kind of the testing regimen that they intend to roll out for students, for staff, and for faculty, the frequency with which that will occur, the other types of measures that they'll do should we be able to come back to at least some sort of in-person. So, I think a lot of us are still figuring this out. Again, to the flexibility piece, we want to see you all on our campuses and to have that same experience that we would have hoped in August or September. We also know that may not be feasible. And so we're going to try and get as much of that as we can, while also being sure that we're ensuring your safety and those of everyone on our campuses.
Adrienne, what are you doing?
Very, very similar to what Erin was describing at UC San Diego. We haven't made any definitive decisions yet because we are, hopeful that we can have an in-person experience for as many students who are able to get to Hartford safely as possible. For international students, we are also allowing an online option in the fall term, or the possibility to just defer starting to January or next year. We're also looking at a possible summer start for some students, which would be very unusual for a school like Trinity to consider something like that. And so I think this is just a really great opportunity for us to figure out how to continue serving students and meeting students and families where they are. And so while it's certainly been challenging, I'm so impressed by my colleagues and the creativity they have showed as we figure out different options and pathways and possibilities to get as many students the sort of residential in-person college experience that they were hoping for.
And Issei?
Yeah, and at Rochester, we're also, navigating it as we go. Conversations are happening around things like housing. There's talk of really putting everyone into a single room, and what does that mean in terms of booking out our surrounding hotels and things to still provide students with on campus, right? Close by housing experience so they can still be on campus and attend classes. Safety is obviously first. I think speaking from New York, there's hesitance on part of a lot of students and families as well, looking at schools in New York, but remembering that Rochester isn't in New York City. We're quite distant, and nearby, is a relative term. So thinking about where your school is when you're applying, and if you're considering that as a risk factor, remembering that New York City is a hot spot, or maybe you have other cities throughout the Northeast, and your college might actually, in our marketing materials, we try to say we're nearby something, and then we're not actually. Okay, and so that's some reality you have to realize before you attend that college. But besides dorms, our orientation programming will be changing. We're trying to take as many components out and provide those online in advance, so we can minimize really the amount of gatherings that need to happen, and focus on the social aspect of orientation when students are on campus. We're fortunate to have the medical center, so we have a hospital that's really the leading medical center of the region, and they're involved in testing and developing vaccines and all that stuff. So we have some great resources. Our president and provost are committed to having students here on campus in the fall. There are coalitions of institutions across the US really trying to push with the government too, to get those embassies open and process visas and increase that capacity. So we're doing as much as we can, but we're prepared for online options. We're prepared for deferrals as well if students need that option.
Yeah, and just to add it to this discussion in the sense is that as I'm looking at the landscape nationally in the United States, every university, college really has student safety as the priority and making sure that their staff and their faculty are safe. So that's priority number one. But also that it's an unusual start to colleges and universities. I think that's part of the discussion and there's a sensitivity to that. But as we're thinking about as you're thinking about your education abroad and as international students, many of you thinking about the United States, knowing that this is a 4-year degree. So you may have an unusual start, but in time, there will be some level of normalcy where you will be interacting and collaborating. So this is in the short term. These experiences are going to be part of your college experience, but in the long term, you're still going to have the opportunities to collaborate in person, to be able to have those discussions. So it's a different way to start, but your overall experience is still going to be, I think, a very high quality experience for students.
Okay. With all of this flexibility of approach and some students perhaps accessing courses online and maybe not having access to the resources that they might normally have in college. This is a bit of a cheeky question, but do you see any indication of colleges being willing to reconsider their tuition fees? Anybody got any thoughts?
I'll say honestly, I don't. I don't think discounts are about to happen in a very large way. I think obviously student fees and services and residential costs, those are impacted if students aren't on campus. We're obviously not going to charge you for a dorm room if you're not here. In terms of our student services, academic advising, career services, tutoring, all of that, every office has had to make the shift to online this semester already. And going into the fall, the advantage that we're going to have is the knowledge that we have to be online. Whereas these courses were sort of moved online in the middle of the semester and we made do, right? The online courses that are offered will be meant to be offered online, right? And the support services going into the fall, you're going to be able to meet with career advisors if you still want to work on that resume. You're going to be able to talk to academic advisors. If you need a tutor, we can offer that one-on-one Zoom tutoring session. So it's a battle anyway when students are on campus, getting them to ask for help and actually take advantage of all the resources that we offer. They are there. We're committed to offering them. So, some fees might change, but I don't think overall a lot of universities are talking about discounts right now.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
would also add that the people that you're investing in when you choose a particular college or university are like the folks who are facilitating your experience in person or online. So the expertise and the caliber of the faculty and their ability to engage with you doesn't change. Like they're still experts in their field, engaging in really important work. And the resources we're providing, they cost money and arguably a little bit more money to execute online as we've all improved our technology and things like that. So I think families picture a college, like sitting on a quad, talking with a professor being one experience, and then sitting in a room much like we are right now being a totally different or lesser experience. And my hope is that we're providing you some really valuable information and insights today, and that and I'm confident that our faculty will continue to provide valuable insights and mentoring to students in person or online.
Thank you. Let's say it was a bit of a cheeky question, so I appreciate your candor in your answer, so thank you. One of the options that is being discussed by some students is the possibility of deferring and perhaps starting their programs later in the academic year, or maybe missing out the whole year and starting in the fall of 2021. Aaron, what's the view of that for UCSD?
The UCs are kind of system-wide, a bit of a unique beast in that typically deferrals are only allowed in the cases of health challenges of the student where they can't come to campus, any sort of required military service for certain citizens, or kind of religious missions and work of that kind. So had this been last year and someone had wanted to defer, we would have said no. In this current climate, I think, again, there will be some flexibility, but I do think that our system and all of our sister campuses will be asking, will not just be granting blanket deferrals, but we'll be asking about the intentions behind it and why. So I do feel our campus is a fairly unique situation there. I do anticipate others will be flexible or more flexible. So if some of my colleagues would like to chime in, but that's the UC perspective is that there's going to need to be some more than I just don't want to be online. To be honest, I think there's going to be something beyond that to grant a deferral. But again, everything will be reviewed case by case and will be considered in the context of this environment.
Adrian, what's the view at Trinity then?
Sure. So we're a smaller community, 2,000 students or so. We can move a little bit more nimbly because of our size. And so we from the get-go, I think even before we changed deposit deadlines and things like that, we were already telling students that they could defer. We already had a January start option for students in place. So it was very easy for us to proactively talk with students about that. But we honestly haven't seen a lot of students taking us up on it yet. And I know part of the reason behind that is because we haven't made decisions about the fall yet and what that will look like. And my anticipation is that soon after we make decisions, we may see a flurry of deferral activity to January or next year. But then I also think as we approach the semester and the reality of additional options and sort of the limitations of additional options besides going and starting a college experience sets in, we're trying to create a system so that students can change their mind, because we think that there will be more people changing their minds and changing their plans kind of rapidly right before the semester starts.
Last but not least, what about the University of Rochester?
Yeah, and we're sort of in between, both in size and policy, right? I think it's going to be circumstances beyond students' control, right? That really end up in those deferrals, whether they're requesting them right now or once we get closer to that semester. We're going to get more clarity with each passing month, right? I actually think a lot of students are eager and excited to come in the fall, and they want to be here as well. But it's simply, if the embassies don't open up, if flights, don't pick up again, those are the kinds of things that are going to prevent students from coming. The conversations are ongoing. How late can a student come to campus and not really have their academic experience impacted for that semester? Right now, our flexibility is mainly with deferral requests to the spring. Students that are requesting a full year deferral at this point, we're saying it's too early, right? You need one of those traditional reasons, really. What kinds of, similar to what Aaron mentioned for the UC system. What are your plans for that year deferral then? Because right now, a whole year, looking a whole year out, we don't know what's going to happen by January. We could be through this, right? Like who knows? We could be through it. We could be even worse, but we'll keep those conversations going, and stay in touch with your school, right? We're trying to keep the communications going. If you've gone a month without hearing from your school, it's probably a little concerning. You should check in. Maybe your email address is wrong, right? Because we have websites and notifications going out every other day, to our current students, prospective students, families. Like I'm an alum and I get messages about the COVID-19 pandemic on campus. I'm like, what if I'm not even there, right? So the communications are coming fast and furious. So pay attention, stay up to date, and we understand, we're going to do our best to get here. We're going to give you the experience that you deserve.
Great. Thanks very much. In a few moments, we're going to go across and try and answer some of the questions that you've all been sending in. But before we do that, I'd like to do a quick run through our expert panel and just say, if you could give one piece of advice to students wanting to enhance their application during times of pandemic, what would it be? Claudia, would you like to kick this one off?
Sure. So I think when it comes to thinking about what are we doing now, like what can I do now, I think students have to start thinking about what resources they have in front of them. And so for a lot of the students who are here today, you're obviously connecting virtually. And so are there ways in which you can use a virtual platform to continue working on the areas that are of most interest to you? So one way in which I'm starting to see students kind of pick up a little bit more work is I think there are populations or portions of our population that are feeling quite isolated in this environment and they feel like they really need to be connected with. So as an example, I'm seeing some students who are organizing ways in which they can organize their classmates to connect with people who may be part of those populations. So as an example, reaching out virtually more to senior citizens or to students who just may be struggling with this transition into our environment. I'm seeing some students enroll in things online, some online classes to kind of take place of perhaps a summer program they couldn't take advantage of. So we're seeing a lot of movement. I'm seeing some creativity for some students in terms of being able to do working from home as a student, perhaps doing an internship and really being able to continue understand how business is working, even though they are not able to go to an organization and lend those skills there. So with that, I can open it up to the other panelists if they have ideas or can share some tidbits about what they know that other students are attempting to do in this new environment to help their applications and to help themselves grow.
Aaron, would you like to pick that one up?
Sure. Yeah, I think that at some level, yeah, we're hearing things that kind of like what Claudia mentioned and what students are kind of doing. I think at the same time, also, we know that different students are handling this differently and that it's okay to just be, in some sense, kind of anxious and mentally overwhelmed and just want to be in your space for a bit. And I think these few months, if you haven't filled them with virtual internships, is not going to derail your college plans. We all are processing this differently, and I think it's okay if you don't come out of it with a new skill necessarily. I also would say that this is a great time for you to really focus on your college search and to think about what you want out of your university experience. And again, as Adrian said, it's going to be maybe different at the beginning for sure, but what kind of institution is going to be a good fit for you? Really understanding the types of things that you want out of your university experience and truly spending the time that you now have to research that as much as you can in a virtual space and to really kind of understand how each of our institutions might be the place for you. And so that you can then therefore in your application, when all of us inevitably ask some type of question or you're kind of confronted with explaining that in your application materials, that you've really spent some time to assess that and I think can put your better foot forward in that way.
Thank you. We want to have time for questions. So Adrian, any short comments from you?
I agree with what Claudia and Aaron said. I would add to to get to know which colleges are going to be best for you, you need to get to know yourself. And as the world has slowed down a little bit, you have a tremendous opportunity right now to look inward and to figure out what you really who you really are. I think a lot of students, especially in the midst of the college process, spend a lot of time looking at external things and sort of collecting achievements in order to get into a specific college, which continues that achievement collection, and you miss the opportunity to really see what you're doing and to really see who you are. And the more you know yourself, the better you're going to navigate the search process, but also the transition to college, even if it's more unusual, because you know yourself and you know what you need. So I would encourage you to take some time and figure out who you are.
That self-awareness is one of the critical things that we always try to encourage students to explore when they're making decisions around college. Is there anything from you?
Yeah, I mean, the key principles of the admissions process have already been encapsulated, right? Like, if you can take these 5 minutes from the webinar, just take them home and make them your life about when you're applying to college. If you're looking for something tangible to work on as you learn about yourself, flip your traditional application timeline. I've worked with a lot of students who are worried, oh, I take the SAT at this time of year, I take the TOEFL at this time of year, so they can go take it for the 5th time in the fall, and be prepared. Maybe transition to maybe taking that test once or twice in the fall. You don't have to spend so much time on those tests. And then, in the spring, you now have time to work on your essays, do that college research like Erin was mentioning. Think about what kinds of things are most exciting to you and what you would talk about in an interview, right? I discourage rehearsing for interviews, but, learning about yourself, talking about yourself, writing about yourself, just do that, even if it's not a specific college essay. When the fall does come, you can worry about those technical things like taking those tests, actually submitting the applications. You have a lot of upfront time and a lot more opportunities. I think the universities have moved a lot more online. And so when I did something in Kazakhstan the other day, EdUSA was really excited. She's like, we have students from towns that never even come to us because they can come on virtually now. So take advantage of all the virtual offerings that universities are putting on right now.
I've really noticed the number of webinars and things that are going on to help students, and I think it's a great enhancement to the process of helping students. So it's really good, I think. Right, so whilst we've been talking, Prakriti and Claudia have been looking at the questions that you've all been asking. So I'm going to hand over to Claudia to take us through at least some of the most popular ones.
Well, great. Well, thank you all for attending our webinar. And thank you for so many great questions. So we have a limited amount of time, so I'm going to try to focus on the questions that have seemed most popular for students at this time. And some of this is going back to the basics of admissions. So earlier we touched upon holistic admissions and what that means very lightly. But we're seeing some questions kind of come up about what are the pieces to holistic admissions and what are the qualities and experiences that admissions committees and admissions officers are looking for. And so I think I'll start off with Adrian first, and then others can chime in.
So it's a tough question to answer because the answer in college admissions a lot of times is it depends. So we are trying really hard to build these vibrant global communities on our campuses or online going forward, hopefully both. And so what we're looking at, there's no clear formula, which is why you heard us a couple of times talk about getting to know yourself, getting to know the colleges, figuring out the things you're interested in. But the things that sort of rise to the top that are a little bit more tangible are, is there something you've been doing over and over again, whether that's working in a job, helping with your family, participating in a club or activity? Like, have you done something consistently for a couple of years? And it's really that couple of year threshold that I think makes a difference versus doing 30 things for 1 month each. Like, college is very much a sustained, you're committing and participating for hopefully 4 years. So we want to see that you're participating in something for many years. We want to see that you're pushing yourself in the classroom. And that's going to mean something very different given the international audience that we have as part of the panel. So if you have an opportunity to take a step up academically, we want you to take that step when it makes sense for you. So we don't want you to try to take 5 steps at a time and put yourself in a position to fail, but we do want to see that you're continuing to step up year over year as you prepare for college. So I think those two, sort of the academic, keep pushing yourself forward and taking on more challenges as they make sense. And then outside of the classroom, participate in something and contribute to something outside of yourself for a couple of years at a time. And if you do that, then you'll stand out.
Sort of as a follow-up question, because the folks that we have here today are Harvard Model UN participants, and many are wondering how are colleges and universities looking at organizations like and participation in Model UN. And Estir or Erin, we can start off with either one of you.
It the same way as any other activity, exactly as Adrian mentioned. I'll see students who go to an MUN competition for 3 days, come back, and they expect that to be the highlight of their application. I'm like, well, what else did you do, right? Like, maybe it's not another MUN event, but are you continually involved in debate, in talking about political issues? Are you interested in these things, and how are you getting others interested in them? Versus simply going to an event and putting it on your resume, right? I think the event is sort of meant to be a culmination of that year-long process of preparation and working with your classmates and engaging in intellectual conversations. So, show us that more so than maybe just the prizes that you got or just the event that you attended.
So there's lots of questions that are coming through. One of the questions that we are receiving is what kind of resources are available to students through this process? Are there good websites that they can go to help them sort of better prepare for the college admissions process, those kinds of things? Erin, why don't we start off with you?
I think I'd like to reiterate what was mentioned about really taking advantage of how we have all been forced into shifting into a virtual setting. And I think that's allowed us to enhance our offerings for students who can't come and visit our campuses, where in the past, perhaps we focused more on the students who were coming and visiting us in person to the detriment of those who couldn't. So, now essentially, most colleges and universities are going to have a very strong virtual presence. And so that might mean virtual advising appointments with admission officers, virtual tours, information sessions. Really, so I would say take advantage of those while they are here for you right now, and when perhaps you can't be doing some of the other things that you might love to be doing outside of your homes. And take advantage of those, I think, first, because it's always best to get it directly from the source and from the institutions themselves. And they're going to be the ones who have the answers about their process, about their institutions, and potentially what they might be doing in this kind of world moving forward, whether it means, what happens on the fall, et cetera, those kinds of things. After that, then, I would say you're really asking the questions of, the folks like Claudia and the folks at, kind of organizations such as this in your high schools, if folks who exist kind of to help you in the college process, because they too are experts and they too are operating with your best interests at heart. And so kind of asking them where, for their advice and their guidance, and also where they might point you, I think are great resources as well.
So I think I'll ask one last question with the time that we have left, and then I will pass it back off. But we have a question about what is the difference between early decision and early action, but also how is that process going to look differently as we're moving into this new environment with COVID and what we're trying to do for next year in terms of enrollment. Adrian, you seem to be nodding your head a lot, so we can start off with you.
I thought we might make it through this webinar without this question coming up, but it's come up on all of the ones I've done over the last couple of weeks. So the difference between early decision and early action is early decision is great if you are 100% certain beyond the slightest shadow of any doubt whatsoever that that school is for you. It is your number one choice, and your family is on board with a financial piece. So both of those things need to happen in order for you to submit an early decision application. And it means when you submit under early decision, then if you are admitted to the college, then you're promising to come. Early action is an earlier application timeline, but you're not committing to attending if you are admitted. So both are options for students to get information about college admissions early. We haven't made a decision yet on our timeline. We offer early decision at Trinity, but not early action. And knowing that timelines, I think, as Thea said, have been turned upside down, I imagine we are certainly thinking through what early decision would mean. We have a later early decision round called Early Decision 2. So we will definitely be keeping that in place for now, and may just shift everything to Early Decision 2. But all of that is still TBD. So if you are taking advantage of the opportunity to do research early right now, since you can't do a lot of other activities, we also want to help students who are ready to make those commitments sort of facilitate their process on your timescale. So I think you'll just see more flexibility going forward on when applications will open and close, given the many different things that we're all trying to navigate right now.
Erin or Asteer, do you have anything to add to that? Perfect. Just wanting to check in. Well, I want to make sure that I know that there are many questions that we were unable to answer today. I believe there will be a method for us to try to go back and answer those questions for folks in the future. But I do want to hand it back off to our host.
Thank you so much, Claudia. Thank you, Claudia Martin, for moderating this for us. Always a pleasure to be working with Ivy Central. Ishtiar, Adrian, and Aaron, thank you for your input. For everyone who's joining us today, I know we haven't been able to answer all the many questions that have been submitted, and I apologize due to the lack of time. But you are always welcome to write to us on the H1 channels or to us directly, and we will be sure to ask those questions to Ivy Central. To help answer questions. We understand this is challenging and for you, and we will do our best to help aid through it. So please feel free to write to us. We have our social media channels on this shortly as well. Also, feel free to reach out, of course, to our directly. You can go to the websites and reach out to them and get some professional advice from the expert itself. Reminder, of course, that H1 Dubai is scheduled to take place online from the 11th to 15th of June. So sign up for it. You will get your links on your courses, but please reach out to us on our social media channels as well. Not just about H1 Dubai, but any questions that you have about applications, about Model UN, about how you can take this further and what you can do to make that again. Thank you, Claudia, Martin, and all our inspiration. And I make sure that all our many students have taken part. And I hope it's a community here for all and for all of the colleges. So thank you for all of your time. You signing off with this. Again, all of you stay home. Stay safe, do whatever you can to keep yourself busy and healthy. And we hope to see you again very soon. So thank you once again.